Christie Lynn Mullins was born on August 28, 1960. At age 14, she lived in Columbus, Ohio, when on August 23, 1975, she set out for what would have been just another ordinary summer day in Columbus. Christie and a classmate, Carol Reeves, had been swimming earlier that afternoon and made plans to walk to the Graceland Shopping Center. Carol claimed she'd received a phone call from a radio DJ announcing a cheerleading competition to be held behind the mall. Christie, though not particularly interested in cheerleading, agreed to tag along. Around 1:45 p.m., the girls arrived at the back of the shopping center near the Woolco store. Finding no one there, Carol went inside to check the time, leaving Christie sitting alone on a guardrail. When Carol returned, Christie was gone. Not long after, Henry H. Newell, Jr., a 25-year-old Clintonville resident and neighbor of Christie's, called the police. He claimed that while walking with his wife and young son through the woods behind Graceland, they came across a scene of horror. A tall, shaggy-haired man was seen swinging a 2x4 plank at a young girl. According to Newell, the man fled when he saw them, and Newell then approached the body and placed his shirt over her face after finding no pulse. He helped police produce a composite sketch of the alleged suspect and was praised as a key witness. 3 days later, on August 26, police apprehended 25-year-old Jack Allen Carman, a developmentally disabled man with an IQ of 50, based on his resemblance to the sketch. After more than 6 hours of interrogation without an attorney or guardian present, Carman confessed, later saying the detectives were being nice to him. Despite serious doubts from the start, he pleaded guilty to aggravated murder, sexual assault, and kidnapping, and was sentenced to life in prison just 11 days after Christie's murder. Carman's confession, however, didn't sit right with many. The Mullins family, especially Christie's father, Norman, never believed he was the real killer. Norman often questioned how a slightly built, mentally challenged man could have overpowered and dragged his strong, athletic daughter, who stood 5 foot 7 inches, into the woods and carried out such a vicious attack. In January 1976, the American Civil Liberties Union stepped in and succeeded in getting Carman a new trial. During the proceedings, a friend of Newell's came forward, testifying that Newell had privately confessed to killing Christie, claiming he only meant to knock her out. Still, no charges were filed against Newell, and in December 1977, Jack Carman was acquitted and released. The case went cold for decades. Years passed. Christie's siblings went on to build families and careers. Their mother tried to move on, but her father couldn't. Norman Mullins was haunted by his daughter's murder until his death in 2006. He was adamant that Newell had been the killer all along, and he spent the rest of his life accusing authorities of protecting the wrong man and ignoring the right one. In 2013, author and attorney John Aller began looking into the case while researching a book. He was a student at Ohio State University when Christie was murdered and had always remembered the case. As he dug deeper, he uncovered inconsistencies in the investigation, unearthed witnesses who had never been interviewed, and brought new information to the Columbus Police Department's cold case unit. That same year, Newell died of lung cancer at age 63. Shortly after his death, his niece, Pam Brown, finally broke her silence. She revealed that when she was 16, her Uncle Henry had confessed to murdering Christie. According to Pam, he told her he'd seen Christie alone, tried to make a move on her, and when she resisted, he tied her hands and assaulted her. She wouldn't stop screaming, he told her, so I picked up a 2x4 and just started bashing her in the head with it. Pam said she stayed silent for years out of fear for her own safety and her family's. In 2015, based on Pam's testimony, corroborating evidence, and Aller's work, the Columbus police officially named Henry H. Newell, Jr. as the person responsible for Christie Mullins' death. Sergeant Eric Pia of the Cold Case Unit publicly stated that they had enough evidence to charge Newell, but it no longer mattered. He was dead. They formally apologized to the Mullins family for the mishandling of the case and the wrongful imprisonment of Jack Carman. The original investigation had been riddled with red flags. Newell had a criminal past that included 2 prior incidents of arson and fraud. His clothing at the time of the murder bore striking similarities to the unidentified suspect he had described. Both were shirtless, in cut-off shorts, and barefoot. The story of the radio DJ that lured the girls to the shopping center was never verified. Christie's mother, Maureen, was stunned to hear cheerleading mentioned, as her daughter had no interest in it. Carol, the classmate, wasn't even someone Christie was known to spend time with, something that raised more questions over time. Physical evidence was poorly preserved or not collected at all, including the shirt Newell claimed he left on Christie's face. And when Newell later burned his own house down in an insurance scam in 1977, it still didn't raise red flags for authorities investigating Christie's murder. It would take 40 years and a combination of a persistent author, a brave whistleblower, and a reawakened investigation to finally bring the truth to light. Christie Mullins, a bright, kind, musically gifted girl who loved her routines and cherished family traditions, like bowls of chili and raisin bran for breakfast, was taken far too soon. While justice didn't arrive in the courtroom, her family finally received what they had fought for all along: acknowledgement of the truth and the clearing of an innocent man's name. Today, thanks to those who refused to give up, Christie Mullins is remembered not just for how she died, but for who she was and for the truth that finally prevailed. Karen Percifield, who went by Cookie, was born on October 12, 1950, in Oregon, to Mildred Parrish and Bruce Percifield. She grew up with her three sisters, Kimberly, Lynn, and Anne, and was known for her warmth and free spirit. Karen eventually moved to Ohio, where she was raising her 6-year-old daughter, Meadow Shoemake. In the summer of 1976, Karen traveled to the coastal town of Aptos in Santa Cruz County, California, to visit one of her sisters. On May 25, 1976, Karen was last seen at the now-shuttered Bayview Hotel, where she had reportedly gotten into an argument with her mother before walking off alone and never returning. 3 days later, on May 28th, deputies were called to investigate a suspicious death near Aptos Village Park and the entrance to the forest of Nisene Marks State Park. There, in a nearby ravine, they discovered Karen's body. She had been stabbed twice in the chest and left to die. The shocking crime quickly launched a homicide investigation. Detectives at the time collected forensic evidence from the scene and pursued multiple leads. One of the early persons of interest was 29-year-old Richard Anthony Somerhalder, who, just months later in September 1976, was arrested for the murders of 2 other women in Santa Cruz County, 31-year-old Vicky Bazzori and 21-year-old Mary Gorman. Though Somerhalder was considered suspicious in Karen's murder, investigators lacked the evidence to formally charge him. Somerhalder would go on to be convicted in the murders of Vicky and Mary. Yet, in a troubling display of leniency under California's sentencing laws at the time, he served only 8.5 years in prison before being paroled and moving out of state. He then died in 1994. Meanwhile, Karen's case went cold. Her daughter, Meadow, just 6 years old at the time of her mother's murder, was left without answers. She was living in Washington and grew up haunted by the loss, enduring decades without knowing the truth about what happened to her mother. In 2019, more than 40 years later, criminalists with the Santa Cruz County Sheriff's Office revisited the case. They submitted several evidentiary items for DNA testing to the California Department of Justice Bureau of Forensic Services. From this, a male DNA profile was successfully developed. However, the profile did not match anyone in national or state criminal DNA databases. In 2023, the Sheriff's Office partnered with Othram, a private lab specializing in forensic genetic genealogy. Othram scientists constructed a comprehensive DNA profile using the degraded evidence, and genealogists worked to build a family tree from the suspect's distant relatives. From there, investigators were able to identify the killer as none other than Richard Somerhalder. Since he died in 1994 and they couldn't obtain his DNA, they used familial DNA testing to confirm the match. Though Somerhalder never faced justice in a courtroom for what he did to Karen, the identification brought long-awaited answers to her family. Though Karen's life was cut tragically short, the work of dedicated investigators and scientific breakthroughs have finally given her story an ending, and her daughter the answers she waited nearly 5 decades to receive. For 20-year-old Mark Harnish and 18-year-old Theresa Marcoux, a beat-up 1967 green Dodge truck with a bumper sticker on the tailgate that read, "Staying alive is no accident," had become their makeshift home. The couple had been living out of it for a few months, parking in various spots in East Longmeadow, Massachusetts, when they weren't staying with friends. Both had attended East Longmeadow High School and were trying to carve out a future for themselves. Mark worked as a mechanic at Shaker Foreign Car Repair, while Theresa held a job in the pets section at Brightwood Hardware. She was also a member of the West Springfield 4-H Club and was described by those who knew her as someone who loved to laugh and always had a smile. On the night of November 18, 1978, Mark and Theresa were seen leaving a friend's party together. It was the last time anyone would see them alive, besides their killer. The following morning, just after 9:30 a.m. on November 19th, West Springfield Patrolman Earl Camp passed the familiar rest area along Route 5 between the Memorial and North End bridges. He'd seen Mark's pickup truck parked there earlier, but this time, something was off, and a closer look revealed the driver's side window had shattered, and there was a pool of blood underneath the vehicle. The cab was empty, but the passenger compartment was soaked in blood. There was also blood in and around the truck and a trail leading away from it. Kemp followed the trail past a guardrail and down a small embankment, where he made a chilling discovery. Theresa and Mark's bodies lying face down on the riverbank, just a few feet apart. Both had been shot multiple times in the head at close range. The crime scene revealed just how violent the attack had been. Blood from inside the truck had pooled so heavily it leaked through to the ground below. The passenger door was blood-stained, and the guardrail near the bodies was dented and smeared with blood, indicating the couple had been dragged from the truck and dumped over the embankment. The truck itself, in rough condition, reflected their difficult living situation. The driver's door had to be tied shut, and the passenger door lacked an inside handle. They often had to climb in through the window. An autopsy revealed that both victims were fully clothed and had not been sexually assaulted. Theresa was shot twice within 12 inches, and Mark was shot at least 3 times, all at point-blank range. The bullets recovered from their bodies and the scene were believed to have come from a large-caliber handgun, possibly a .38. Police combed the area for evidence, including in trash bins, roadside ditches, and culverts, but the murder weapon was never found. There was no evidence of robbery, no known enemies, and no involvement with drugs. Though a small amount of marijuana was found in the truck, it was considered insignificant and unrelated to the crime. The couple had no known conflicts, romantic or otherwise. The most promising piece of evidence was a bloody fingerprint found on the passenger side vent window of the truck. Investigators compared it manually to approximately 70,000 fingerprint cards and entered it into the Massachusetts Automated Fingerprint Identification System, or just AFIS, but no match was found. With no suspects, no weapon, and no motive, the investigation stalled. For decades, the case haunted the community and devastated the families. Theresa's mother suffered from severe mental illness for the rest of her life, and her father passed away young, believed to be from the physical toll of grief. For nearly 46 years, the murders of Theresa Marcoux and Mark Harnish remained unsolved until October 2024, when someone finally broke their silence. The Hampton County District Attorney's Office received a call naming Timothy Scott Jolie, then 71 years old, as a person of interest. Investigators discovered that Jolie had lived in Springfield in 1978 and had purchased a Colt handgun just a month before the murders. A key break came when investigators located a fingerprint card Jolie had submitted in 2000 as part of a taxi license application. When they compared the print to the bloody one left on Mark's truck, it matched to Jolie's thumbprint. On October 30th, 2024, authorities arrested Jolie at his home in Clearwater, Florida. By then, he was an amputee with no legs, living alone in a one-room apartment, wearing a diaper and receiving daily visits from home nurses. He waived extradition and was returned to Massachusetts to face 2 counts of murder. Despite the arrest, many questions remain unanswered. Investigators have found no clear motive or any known connection between Jolie and the victims, and he had no significant criminal record. As of today, Jolie remains in prison, awaiting trial, and if convicted, could receive life in prison. Monica Cameroni De Adams was born on November 13, 1958. By the age of 65, she had run into some bad luck and was now living in her 2001 Honda Odyssey minivan in San Diego, California. Sadly, in the early morning hours of November 5, 2023, her life took a tragic and preventable turn. A 24-year-old man named Jordan Lopez, driving under the influence, crashed his white Hyundai Sonata into Monica's parked minivan. Lopez had a blood alcohol level of 0.26, more than 3 times the legal limit. Lopez had been drinking at a local bar before getting behind the wheel and striking 2 parked cars, including Monica's. When officers arrived on the scene, Lopez, drunk and slurring his words, said, and I quote, "I made an oopsie." Despite the wreckage and damage to Monica's van, its rear door crushed and side door pushed into the middle row, no one checked inside the vehicle. Officer Brace noted in his report that the vehicles were filled with property and were towed to avoid further vandalism or theft. The van was then taken to Allied Gardens Tow Company on Fairmont Avenue by Roadway Towing. Officers, nor the tow truck driver, had any clue that Monica was still inside, trapped and injured in the back seat. She had been sleeping in the middle row when the crash occurred. The van was towed and parked in the impound lot with Monica entombed within. For an entire month, her family had no idea where she was. On November 13th, Monica's 65th birthday, her daughter, Natalia Danielle Cameroni Adams, attempted to call and text her mother but received no response. Growing increasingly worried, Natalia filed a missing persons report with the San Diego Police Department on November 14th, 8 days after the collision. It wasn't until December 6, 2023, that the truth was uncovered. A tow yard employee at Allied Gardens Tow Company noticed a strong odor coming from Monica's van and opened the door. Inside, they found her decomposing body wedged under her belongings in the middle seat. According to the medical examiner, her remains were heavily decomposed, her face unrecognizable, and her skeleton visible. She had multiple extensive injuries, including fractured ribs, a spinal fracture, and a compound fracture in her right upper arm. The official autopsy listed her cause of death as blunt force trauma. However, it also noted that Monica had sustained severe but survivable injuries. She may have lived for some time after the crash, and there remains a devastating question: could she have been saved if she had received medical attention? The fact that Monica was visible to anyone looking inside makes her death all the more incomprehensible. Her family, represented by attorney John Carpenter, filed a $50 million lawsuit against the City of San Diego, the San Diego Police Department, Officer Matthew Brace, Roadway Towing and Recovery, and the drunk driver Jordan Lopez. The suit alleges negligence, wrongful death, civil rights violations, and tortious interference with human remains. The family argues that Monica was essentially buried alive in her van. The family didn't even receive a copy of the medical examiner's report until October 16, 2024, nearly a year after Monica's death. In the meantime, they were left in limbo, mourning a mother they thought had simply vanished. On March 19, 2025, Jordan Lopez was sentenced to 5 years of probation with a 6-year prison term suspended after pleading guilty to DUI, causing injury, and having a blood alcohol content over 0.15%. Prosecutors did not pursue the original vehicular manslaughter charge, reportedly due to uncertainty over the exact time of Monica's death and the argument that she may have been alive for some time after the collision. Monica's death highlights a broader crisis facing the homeless population in California. In 2023 alone, nearly 500 unsheltered people died in San Diego County from hypothermia, overdoses, and vehicle-related deaths. As the lawsuit moves forward, Monica's children continue to seek justice for their mother, whose life was cut short, not just by a drunk driver, but by a chain of inexcusable oversights that led to her dying alone, unseen, and forgotten for weeks. Pamela Pitts was born to Paul and Carol on June 25, 1969, at K.I. Sawyer Air Force Base in what is now Forsyth Township, Marquette County, Michigan. 19-year-old Pam was described as full of life and compassionate, with a deep love for animals. She was also known for her vibrant 1980s rock style. Sadly, in late summer 1988, a horrible tragedy occurred. On September 16th, Pam disappeared after going to a party about 100 miles north of Phoenix in an area called Gordo's Pit or Alto Pit. 2 weeks later, her body was discovered in the Prescott National Forest. The circumstances of her death were chilling. Her body had been burned beyond recognition and left in a pile of trash. Theories swirled in the small town of Prescott, with some wondering if it was a drug deal gone wrong or maybe a satanic ritual. Over the years, countless tips poured in, but none led to a breakthrough. The case seemed destined to remain unsolved. Meanwhile, the community feared a killer was on the loose. Then, the investigation turned to Pamela's former roommate, Shelley Harmon. 3 years after Pam's murder, Shelley was arrested and charged with the murder of her ex-boyfriend, Raymond Clerks. Apparently, Clerks ended their relationship and was going to take their dogs. However, Shelley, in a burst of anger, shot him as he lay on the roof of a car watching planes overhead. She later dropped his body in a mine shaft. In 1993, she was found guilty and sentenced to 20 years in prison. Now that investigators had a suspect, they needed to find evidence and begin monitoring Shelley's phone calls. As the days passed, investigators uncovered 20 hours of recorded conversations that would change everything. In one of those recordings, Shelley's father asked her what really happened to Pamela. Her reply was chilling, quote, "I had a moment. I had a huge moment," end quote. This subtle admission led prosecutors to believe that Shelley may have been responsible for Pamela's death. However, it would take 33 years before Shelley officially confessed. In her confession, she admitted that she had killed Pamela in a fit of rage over overdue rent and a shared bank account. She said, and I quote, "I just lost it." She said she repeatedly struck Pam until she was no longer able to breathe. Then, in a panic, she made the tragic decision to burn Pamela's body to cover up the crime. But Shelley's confession came with a shocking twist. The case, now more than 3 decades old, ended with a plea deal. Shelley received a sentence of just 20 years for second-degree murder, but due to time already served for her previous conviction, the plea allowed her to avoid additional prison time. The Pitts family was left devastated by the outcome. Pamela's brother, Paul Pitts Jr., expressed his anger, saying she got a golden ticket and she got away with murder. Though the case was officially closed, the pain for Pamela's family didn't fade. They remembered Pamela, the kind, tough young woman with dreams that would never be realized. They scattered her ashes near Thumb Butte, a place she had loved to visit, and held on to her memory, refusing to let the years of pain and frustration go unacknowledged. As for 50-year-old Shelley Harmon, now called Shelley Norgard, she lives in Nevada, remarried and living quietly under the shadow of her past. Friends and neighbors describe her as a generous woman, yet some still believe her confession was only a means to avoid further time behind bars. As for Pamela's family, Shelley's confession will never heal the hurt caused by her horrible actions.